until the top of the hour.
Amazing. This is exciting.
Yeah.
Spicy. Oh,
how is your day going?
It's going. I'm having one of those days where it feels like 3 days condensed in one, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm just like, this is how today feels, I guess.
Okay, so that's an interesting question because sometimes I feel like I'm so stuck in a point of neutrality that sometimes I forget like the human emotion that comes with everything. Do you ever come across that?
Yes, but I also think that's kind of natural as like our response as humans, right? Because if you were to feel everything at all times, that'd be one heck of a time.
Right?
Yeah, someone had reminded me of the emotional wheel. Are you familiar with that?
Tell me more.
It looks like a color wheel, and it's like something ridiculous, like over hundreds of feelings on this wheel. But it's basically like you can trace how you're actually feeling from like the outer emotions. Also, I apologize for any background noise. I have a the French bulldog that's very right here.
My community is so used to it because my kids will get wild in the background sometimes. So you're cool.
Amazing. Also loving the singing bowls in the background.
Oh, thank you. I'm like, all right. It looks like we have some people joining us.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm Crisel Valenzuela, and I'm the multidimensional medium and spiritual. I struggle with how to identify myself because I feel like I'm always in flow with that, but I'm a spiritual awakening coach, mentor, teacher. And I have a really special guest on with me today. I'm not going to tell you too much about her because I won't be able to do her justice. But I'm bringing her on today because we had kind of waxed poetic on the energetics of money. And I thought, what a great way to bring people onto my demonstration hour to really talk about something that really lights me up. So TJ, why don't you start off by sharing what you want to be known for, your pronouns, where you're joining us from, and we'll start there.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, my name is TJ. I run the site called dailymagic.ca, which is a blog and online store for spirituality and wellness. But it's so much more than that. My journey had actually started a long time ago in my youth with exploring like this world of mysticism and tarot. And then later in my adulthood, discovering how this all intersects with my decolonization journey as a Filipinx and queer person. My pronouns are they, them, but I still do respond to girl and queen. So don't get it twisted.
Thank you.
Yes. Just let me throw it out there because people always tend to ask. But yeah, I'm very passionate about decolonizing wellness and spirituality. I read tarot, I do astrology readings, I teach Reiki, and amongst all of these intersections within like spiritual practices, I think it's really important that we unpack where these things come from, especially using money as a vehicle to access these things, which is why our conversation today is just going to be so spicy and so juicy. And I'm like very excited to talk about this with you.
Awesome. Why don't you share where you're joining us from?
I am from Toronto, Canada, and it's snowing. If anyone was wondering, it is snowing.
I can't even tell you what the weather is like here because I'm being a little bitch talking about 65-degree weather, and you're probably like, give me that, let's trade.
Yeah, gladly, if you'd like. And today's not even a bad day. I think today's like -3.
Girl. No, thank you.
I don't even know. I'm like, I don't know. It feels like that. I could be wrong.
Well, what a great intro. One thing I want to mention, and I'll probably dig into this a little bit later. I've been watching you have a tarot community that you launched. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Oh, the
Uh-oh.
tarot community. So the tarot course. Yes. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, go. You're good.
Perfect. So the tarot course that I had just launched, and actually doors are closing tonight at midnight, is the Tarot Truth Seekers Tarot course. And I was really inspired to start this course again, inspired by my decolonization journey and just inspired by the change that I really feel like we need to see starting within the communities and spaces that we exist in. So ever since I started my practice in 2016, I had noticed that a lot of the predominant spaces that are in existence, especially in the Greater Toronto area, mainly catered towards like a lot of goddess culture and like cis white women. And it was always like a little awkward for me to enter a lot of these spaces, let alone feel validated in these spaces, feel like I knew what I was talking about. You know, every so often I felt imposter syndrome sneak in, and I felt like these questions of like, is it me? Am I missing something? Then realizing that really it's difficult to fit into spaces that aren't inherently built to or built for you. So I had kind of embarked on this quest of asking or trying to find the answer to how do we create spaces? How do we create space? How do we create representation? And so I launched this course with the hope that, you know, this could be a comprehensive resource for people of color, for BIPOC and queer folks who feel like they really feel called to work with tarot, but there are no learning resources out there that really acknowledge this decolonization path. There are no learning resources out there that are really built towards talking about these deeper conversations around politics, around the history, around unpacking what these spiritual practices are. So that's really the start of it. And then, of course, just making a great resource that really is all that you need in one place and continues to grow as we all grow as a community. Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that. So I'm gonna come back to that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go ahead and just jump into what we're here for today. And let's talk about, so we're talking about the energetics of money. And why don't we start? Because I feel like it's always important to give context to where your perspective is coming from. So would you mind sharing what your relationship to money is, or what your money story is?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I should also tell folks that I am a Capricorn sun. So talking about money is it's fun. It's fun for me, but it wasn't always so. I think there will be parallels in some folks' stories when I say this. Like I lived through the whole like broke ass student time, you know. Am I allowed to swear during this?
Yeah.
Okay. I always feel like, you know,
You're
you gotta set the tone. I gotta respect that. But I actually have come from a background as a musician, and as people know, within the arts, there isn't a lot of money. And then also splashing that with the context of being a POC, like a second generation Filipino immigrant, you know, there's a lot to unpack there. So my money story probably even predates my birth, really.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
yeah, like we inherit a lot of these mindsets and these narratives about what money is and what money can do for us. And I think like many immigrants coming to North America, coming to Canada, coming to the States, we buy into this narrative that of like the American dream, that like as long as I go there where the grass is greener, I will have abundance and I'll have it all. But of course, I grew into a family that quickly had told me from the get-go that that's not necessarily true. You still do have to pair that with a lot of hard work and sweat and sometimes money. In fact, it was taught to me very early on that oftentimes money doesn't come easy. So there's one of the mindsets, right? Money doesn't come easy. Money doesn't grow from trees, but it definitely doesn't come easy. Therefore, it requires a lot of sacrifice and a lot of unhappiness in order to make the money that you want and make the life that you want. And so already stepping into my adulthood, choosing a career in the arts, I was instantly faced with a lot of diverse people that I had never, met if I had gone kind of like the straight and vanilla route. Like if I had decided to take up marketing in school or something and chosen
Excuse me. I'm just kidding.
No shade.
I know.
No shade, but everyone that I was going to school with was flat out broke.
Mm-hmm.
And so even within those spaces, it's hard to rewire your narrative about money if all the jobs and all of the opportunities people know of are in competition with one another. So there's already this mindset that there's not enough to go around, right? So I inherited that mindset from musicianship and from the musical circles, unfortunately, that there's not enough opportunity for everyone. And you have to be inherently special in order for you to be valued. There needs to be something almost mythical about you in order for you to succeed, whatever this idea of success is. So yeah, my money story was, there was a lot of difficulty. There was a lot of losses as well. I didn't have the financial literacy when I was in my younger years. I didn't have the financial literacy as I should have. Like, why give people a credit card if they're not going to know what a credit card, how it works, and what to use it for, and how to manage it? So there were definitely a lot of losses on my path and a lot of, insecurity. Because when you look at your bank account, when you look at the student debt, if you look at the loans, if you look at the debt owing, you look at that as almost a representation of your personal value, which is the furthest thing from the truth, right? It's just a representation of how we are in relationship to our current reality and the systems that are in place. So it's taken a lot of time, and it's also part of my decolonization work, to reevaluate and also reprogram this relationship I have with money, because it isn't and it shouldn't be this demonized thing that we talk about it and we always demonize it to be and make it out to be. Money really is this valuable tool that can really help us propel forward and also serve what it's supposed to be, like a fair tool for exchange. Yeah.
I think that's a good segue into my next question, because I'm teaching this class, Healing Your Relationship with Wealth, which is really a class on the energetics of money. Mm-hmm. And where I see people get really tripped up is what money represents to them. Like for a lot of people, I notice that people see money as the goal. Mm-hmm. But really, what is your take on that?
That's so interesting, because I think we all buy into that a little bit, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Like money is the goal. Like, how do you envision yourself in 5 to 10 years? Flossing, stacks on stacks on stacks everywhere, green, money so abundant that I can wipe my tears with it. But really, I think it's this inherent need that we need to reframe what the purpose is, right? I mean, say it flat out, right? Money is not the goal, because money, every time that we reach another milestone or a benchmark, there's always going to be another want. Mm-hmm. As long as we attach our desires and our happiness to something that is as unreliable as money, like our tools, as long as we're attaching our happiness, which is something intangible, to something physical, that feeling of satisfaction is never going to be reached. So I think that's a really, really big pill for us to kind of swallow.
Totally. So one of the ways that I see money that helps me detach from like the negativity that's associated with money is I see money really as just a physical representation of energy. Like you're putting your money and you're investing your money into XYZ, and really that's just you that's where you're throwing your energy at, and that's where you're creating. And I'm in this 3-day money, I don't want to call it belief money mindset class because it's more about the somatic experience of wealth. But what really stuck out to me was the way that the practitioner talks about how, if you think about it, when you are in right relationship to money, which is the energy, it turns into prosperity. When you have whatever it is that your goal is, and you aim really big and you aim for something much bigger than yourself, something that transcends you and then spreads out into the community, that's when you really start to create like a real abundance. Because when you keep it within yourself, you're just cycling in the individuality of it as opposed to tapping into the collective energy. And I thought that was really powerful, the way, because for me, it's like I get these ideas about, oh, that's how we're supposed to look at, or that's what it really represents. And then I like run through this pattern of like, how am I going to bring that full circle? Like, what does that really mean? Like, I get these really general ideas. And then when she said that, I was like, that's what we're supposed to do.
Hell yes.
Right? I was like,
it's all energy.
yeah.
And I know as a fellow practitioner, you know, when someone says that, your brain probably looks like that meme with all the calculations going on. You're like, yes, it is energy. But at first glance, that statement seems so simple, but it really isn't, is it? Because energy is so many things. And what I love about that is I kind of coined this term for myself when I talk about money. It's basically like the energetics principle, right? The energetics of an exchange. And you know, the reason why we've created money is because it's like a placeholder for the energy that I'm going to give for this exchange. So if instead of doing a barter system, you know, back in the day, it would take a farmer how many months to create a beautiful crop of food? But that's energy and heart and soul and skill. And that's their energy transferred through this crop, through this fruit that I'm about to share with you, through this papaya, right? And if I'm trading this papaya with you so that you can help me build a new roof on my house, that's your skill and energy, right? And there is like a level of respect because it also requires you, in order to do a proper barter exchange or energy exchange, to fully respect what the other person has to offer for you. And really ask the question of, do I need this? And I think seldom in this current age that we're in, because everyone's in this feeling of like scarcity, right? Because of the system that we're in, because of the way that capitalism has evolved. We look at money as almost like anything that comes at me, I have to say yes to, because I don't know when the next opportunity is going to come up. I don't know when the next opportunity to receive energy is going to come up, is essentially what we're saying. Which, when we change those words, it doesn't seem quite true, does it?
I agree with you. I agree with you on so many levels, because when people, I mean, this is one of the questions that I was going to ask you about. I was like, what are your thoughts on law of attraction rhetoric? Because I feel like this falls perfectly into it, because people that push the law of attraction, they're like, all you have to do is be in the energy and bam. And it's like, no, it's very nuanced, because it's not just, I feel it, so I create it. There's, just like you mentioned earlier, you know, your money story transcends you. It goes further back. It goes further back than your parents. And those are the things that we need to take into consideration. So it's like, you know, you have to understand your own energy, number one, because you need to understand the paradigm that you're working within. And then, and it's just like you're saying, like, I feel like as you're describing that scenario where people are talking about, or I'm sorry, where people are bartering, and then you really have to be mindful of what is your worth and what worth are you claiming. That has a lot to do with self-worth and the stories you have around self-worth. So when we talk about the energetics of money or even creating wealth or abundance, I feel like you have to understand who you are first, because that is the framework that you're working in,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And
I
then, what were you going to say?
sorry, but I mean that line alone, like you need to understand who you are first. If only it was mandatory for us to have lesson or instruction or the space to be self-inquisitive before we even started to deal with any of this, you know? Why is it okay for like, how old are you have to be to have a credit card? Like 18?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it okay for an 18-year-old to decide they can spend tens of thousands of dollars on something, not understanding the gravity of that, without actually understanding who they are and how they're actually going to fulfill energy in like the collective and in communities, right? And it
Yeah.
kind of goes back to the whole like rhetoric of, you know, when people say we shouldn't be pressuring the youth to understand their life purpose in like the confines of like 4 years of like what high school is. But I'm going to even push that even further. Like we shouldn't be pressuring people the we shouldn't be pressuring people to participate within this like financial and like very capitalistic system if we haven't equipped each other yet and understanding how we're going to survive it, like what my strengths are, what do I bring along with me as my skills to help me protect while I'm like protect myself, protect my energy, protect my integrity as I'm trying to navigate these places. We kind of just get thrown into the workplace and this working world and are like told the objective is money, which is not true. And then
Mm-hmm.
once we start dealing with all of this and dealing with the energetics that's attached to money, the scarcity mindset, the feelings of or a lack of abundance versus abundance, like it can get very confusing.
Yeah. How long ago was it that you were in college? And did you have the people with tents that would be like, apply for this free credit card on your campus?
We didn't, but we were in close proximity to it. So I graduated my BA in, yeah, I did graduate the same year that I started my practice, so 2016. Um, and well, the thing is, my campus was also, it was very strange. It this is completely unrelated. No one asked for this, but it was also, and you'd appreciate this as a medium, it was also a former psychiatric ward converted into.
That is bad energy right there.
It was a bad time, so let me tell you, it was a very bad time. But when they're telling you about student anxiety, whew, but that's a story for another time. I'm sure you can already feel. Is it ghosts or is it my anxiety around grades? Who
Yeah,
knows?
that would just
Um,
compound it.
yes, compound. But I know exactly what you're saying about, you know, those companies and like those reward programs and all this stuff, things that are masked as opportunities for you to build credit and also opportunities for you to invest in yourself or invest in things. And then they end up being just like other ways of reeling you into playing this weird
It's
money game.
predatory.
It is. That's a
Yeah.
very good point. It
Yeah.
is.
So, when I was in college, which was in the early 2000s, it was around the time of when like 2008 when the recession and the mortgage bubble like burst. And when I went to college students getting credit cards was such a huge problem because we'd have tents of people pushing credit card applications on campus. And I'm sure Canada is not all that different, but in the US, it became you weren't allowed to do that anymore if you were a credit card company. And then the slap on the wrist for the banks, a big part of it was actually that they had to start providing financial literacy to the community to like make amends for what they did. And I think it's so funny that that's the slap on the wrist that they had to get. And I know this because a I work at a bank and I worked at a bank during the time that this happened. And I've helped with the financial literacy part. And so there are all these, there's even regulation around how they show up in the community and how they solicit themselves around those events. And I like to think, since everything's energy, that's like karma.
100%. To go back to what you were saying with energy, it's like, so here's the thing about the money exchange piece, right? And like the whole energy exchange piece. And I know that within spiritual practices and spaces, like energy exchange is becoming more popular because it's a way to create accessibility where, you know, monetary exchange sometimes is impossible. So the karma piece is so important because when we deal with each other's energy, especially within money, like there's always going to be a way for it to come back tenfold, right? Like to answer your question earlier about my thoughts on like the law of attraction, I do subscribe to it, but not in like the cookie cutter, like one size fits all kind of way that it's kind of promoted, right? There's nuance, like you said. If you accept energetic exchange from someone, you also understand that there's like fine print that also comes with that, whether or not people are aware of it, right? And it also comes in the form of like, if someone is really trying to help you and is like pushing an energy exchange onto you, whether that's like monetary or not, also understanding what energies might be attached to that. I've been in times where people have offered me like, you know, said, I really believe in what you do. I want to invest in you. But then something didn't feel right about that energy exchange. And I'm glad that I listened to my intuition, because when you say yes to even times that seem like, you know, like, wow, look at this like miraculous opportunity of someone like giving me like this dream amount of money, there's a lot of fine print that's also attached to that. There's expectation, there's the ego and the energy that that person also carries. There's, you know, and it goes both ways. Like it also can do things to ourselves. And kind of, we always ask for abundance, but sometimes we also have to sit within the reality of, if I was to get what I receive, am I ready for that?
Let's dig more into that scenario of bringing people in and like using investors. You talked a little bit about you have to consider what kind of energy they start to mix in with yours if you let them co-create with you. Share a little more about that.
Oh yes, because we need to be mindful of who is permitted our energy. So first off, like in foundations, if we take it back a bit about like what this really means from like a monetary standpoint of view, money in itself requires energy to acquire, does it not? So it requires energy for us to acquire it. So even if we take it back to how we acquire the money, this is why it's so important. It sounds so cliche for folks to do what you love for a job, because that joy that you are spending, or also on the flip side, the anxiety and the stress that is required of you to acquire this money is also now attached to that money you've gained. So getting $10 from a minimum wage job that you absolutely hate versus $10 doing something that you absolutely love. Let's say it's a $10, I don't know, tarot reading or energy reading, right? Suddenly that $10 feels different. Suddenly that $10 feels so much more when you're acquiring it, doing something that you absolutely love. And so already from the get-go of us acquiring the money, there's energy attached to that. So every step of the way that this money transfers and how it's transformed along the way, throughout us acquiring it, throughout us investing in it, or us spending it, each of these actions attaches some kind of money to it. So we know like the idea of dirty money. Oh yeah. Grew up with watching The Godfather every Christmas. Give you an idea of my family. That's a Christmas tradition. But The Godfather, right? Like the idea of dirty money. Well, what makes money dirty? Dirty in air quotes. Yes, it can be through like that very dramatized idea of like it being acquired through a corrupt means, but then it also can come from a place of energetically, like, is this coming from an authentic place, right? is this coming from someone who's acquired the money respectfully or with integrity, or also deals with their money in a mindful way, right? There was an interesting infographic. I don't know if you've seen this circulating around, but it was trying to visualize through dots the value of like $1 billion. Have you seen that before?
I have
Okay.
not.
So I definitely invite folks to like look that up, because it is actually bing, light bulb off in my brain when I saw it, because in theory we know $1 billion is a lot, but to just take it another step further, folks like to bring up Jeff Bezos as an example of capitalism a lot these days. Of course, he's the easy name to name drop, but they were saying, to give you an example or to reframe why it's really important for billionaires to be doing this work and this deep spiritual work and this deep awareness work as well, is because look at this. And they showed a whole picture of 1 billion dots versus 1 million versus 50,000 versus 1,000. And it was, I'm telling you, if you're a visual person, definitely go look it up, but it's insane, because if you visually see it, here's $1 billion and here's what most people, air quotes, or at least from statistics, is considered like a livable salary, and it's like just a tiny fraction of what $1 billion is.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about like energetics of money, $1 billion can feel very empty really fast, especially if it's not attached with the right type of energy or intention. Like, what is the point of having that if it has no value?
Yeah. When it doesn't have value, it's just, and this is something personally that I've been moving through. Like, if it doesn't have value, it's just mindlessly making its rounds, making its cycles. Because I notice in how if my husband watches this, he'll probably kill me and he'll agree. But money comes in and out with me, basically. Like I probably have an idea for whatever income I'm about to receive. I already have an idea of where it's going to go. And when there's no intention there, when there's like no substance there, it's just like this mindless cycle of it just going in and out and in and out. And I know that that's a money wound in itself, because it's something I've been unpacking. Like, why can't I just hoard a little bit? Like, there's nothing wrong with hoarding a little bit, because it also comes into the idea of safety. Like, there's some safety themes in that too. But you were talking about pleasure and kind of like how it feels good when how you're making that exchange, when it's fulfilling for you, as opposed to when you make that exchange and kind of like we were talking about, like when there's no intention there, or maybe the intention there isn't as connected or aligned to you. When you feel into scarcity or when you feel into abundance, do you have a somatic awareness of it in your body?
That's a really good question, right? I think that also goes back to the principle you said about just knowing ourselves, because I think it can really manifest physically in a number of different ways for different people. And also unpacking what the root is. You brought up core wounds in terms of like our money stories, and like that is so valid, because what is the root of us having this strained relationship with money, right? For myself, I'll use myself as an example. When I'm not in balance, I know that the first areas of my body that kind of go off are my throat chakra. So my ability to communicate and my ability to see things fairly and equitably gets a little clouded, which also means that monetarily, if I'm not energetically balanced, I will just say yes to everything.
Because there's no discernment there.
Because there's no discernment. And so it's very important for us to understand our true, like our personal true nature, and the things that we already kind of might naturally find struggles with. And it's okay to point the finger at saying, like, this is something I struggle with. And actually, one of my colleagues likes to bring up fear journaling in their practice all the time. You know, it's okay to actually sit with the icky feelings and like the uncomfortable feelings, because that's the stuff that we need to be paying attention to, so that we know when we have these signals in our body and when our body's telling us that, ooh, something's off, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you posted a video of the alignment of saying yes and no and what your
Oh,
body's
yeah,
doing. I love that because
yeah.
I love that because I'm like, yes, your body into a pendulum, please. Yes, our bodies can tell us so much. Our bodies can tell us
Yes.
so much.
So this is going a little off topic, but I feel like I come across a lot of people that get so into channeling energies outside of themselves, whether it be archangels or ascended masters or extraterrestrials, whatever. I mean, that's cool if you want to work with them, but some people get so caught up in the hype of like trans channeling them. And I have some opinions on that, and I'd love to hear what you think.
Okay, should I say what I think first?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna say this straight up because different things serve different people, and as you and I both subscribe to the belief that different truths can exist in this multidimensional space. Like, everyone carries their own truth. Whether or not I vibe with someone else's truth, that's on me, you know, because I cannot deny that they have their own truth. Just like there are different political parties and different ways of believing and worshiping deities and gods. And so I'm like, it's not the practices. I don't have any shade or, like, honestly no judgment on practices, because I understand and I've done some really heavy, heady kind of work in my time. But at what point are we going to integrate is the question. Because you can't you can't spend your whole days wishing you were a plant and then just staying there, because I've been there, because the highs are so delicious and so
It's
tempting.
tempting.
It's so tempting. But that's the thing, like, at the end of the day, and something that my astrology practice taught me is that it doesn't matter what elements are dominant in your chart, you still have every single zodiac element in your body and in your chart. Why? Because the cosmos is inside of you. So whether or not a planet is aligned doesn't eradicate the fact that Cancer exists, that Pisces exists, that Virgo exists, like all of these signs exist. So it doesn't mean that just because something doesn't show up as a planet placement or as a dominant element in your personal chart doesn't mean that you don't have that element. Above all else, we're still earthly beings. So as long as we're in this realm, unfortunately, I'm sorry, y'all, we have to play the game. And we have to figure out how to play the game in a way that's
No
conducive.
apologies. No apologies, because I am right there with you. I feel my belief is very strongly that we are here on earth as humans, and that is part of our purpose. And so you can't play escapism through channeling. Like, at some point you have to be like, "Oh yeah, that's right. You're working with me because you need my help, other divinity energy, because I'm the one who's here with the purpose." Like, I'm
Yes.
And so I bring that up because, I mean, I think you know my chart, but I'm like all earth. I'm Virgo sun, Capricorn moon, and I think I'm a Capricorn rising too. I'm like, yeah, I'm like all earth. I'm just so earthy. But uh when I connect with spirit, when I do readings, a lot of it is a somatic experience. Like, I'm very sentient. And when I was asking you, like, do you feel just like the scarcity and abundance show up for you in your body? And I'm starting to work in that context, like trying to see how that feels for me. But a lot of times when I'm reading other people, whether it's an energy reading or not, I always feel where the tension is in their body. And it tells me like, that's my hook in, and that tells me what they're going through. And so I always feel like our body is connected to our mind. But I feel like this experience happens because your mind is feeding your body to send the red flag to call your attention to it.
It's so true. It's also really tasty for you to bring that awareness to your astro placements, because I think a lot of folks spend time just reading themselves to death. I mean, it's fun. It's fun to like read memes and be like, haha, that's me, but then cry about it later. But to really sit with yourself, and that's something that I've also been working through, is like sit with myself and be like, that is my human design right there, right? There's nothing flawed about it. It's just is. And so if I can understand that my body is telling me these things, or these signals come through to me physically, then I can navigate things with more ease. Because as spiritual, earthly vessels and beings, who told us that this experience was supposed to be hard and not fun? Like that's been a question, you know? Who told us that we weren't supposed to have fun and have joy during the challenges and during this path, right? There is nowhere that says that this has to be a time of suffering and a time of pain and like constant loss. And I know that's really difficult for us right now because we are in a very sensitive time. But I think reminding ourselves that inherently there's nothing wrong with us as beings. Like our design is a reflection of the cosmos. But it's when we look into who we are in our nature, we really find that comfort and solace in knowing, oh, I do have those intuitive abilities. Oh, I do have these tools and skills innately built within me to help me prepare for what I need to prepare for. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I get you. I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I started my spiritual business about 2 years ago, but I didn't really start taking it serious until right before the pandemic. And I know for me, because I have these signs, which I feel like I don't let them explain to me who I am, but I feel like they validate and confirm a lot about who I am and how I identify, because I am very like, I could be logical, rational, organized, and structured 100%. And so when I started my conscious journey into spirituality, I didn't have any paranormal or supernatural experience going into it. I went purely with the expectation that I'm going to learn some self-care tools because I really need that in my life right now. And I took it so far because it was just so fascinating, and I just followed the joy and pleasure of it. And so when I think about what is it that I want to share with people, it's showing them that they have access to it, and they can do it too. Like if I could do it coming from nothing, which later on you realize that there was never nothing, that there was always something. But knowing that you have access to this, I've always put my teachings in the context of, let me teach you psychic development. But now I understand, like, the magic is in putting into context for people to understand it, to see why it's valuable for them. Because this energetics of money class that I teach, I'm teaching them psychic development, whether they realize it or not.
And you get snaps for that, because isn't that what it is?
Yeah.
Sorry, y'all. You thought you came for the money. We catfished you a little bit.
Yeah.
But great news is you're still going to get a great relationship with money, and you might be able to, convene with spirit along the way.
Oh, totally.
I love it. But isn't that everything? Like,
yes.
see, I poke fun at marketing, because it's like that is something that I have done work in. Like, I've worked in marketing, and every so often people ask me in my non-bruja hours, in my non-witch time that I have, people ask me to help them with their businesses. And really, it's really funny because any discipline that you take up and any path that you are on, whether you're in a more quote unquote like logistical field of work, you can always find the strings of spirituality in there. Because what is business but just spiritual clarity? And
Yes.
your clarity on your purpose. And what is this course that you're teaching? What is the energetics of money? But just understanding energy work and intuition and understanding how to listen to spirit. Like
To trust,
it's all
to
the
trust
same
yourself.
thing.
Yep. That's, yeah, it was funny because when I was writing up the content and the structure, I had wrote out like this speech to start day one with like, psych, this is not going to be about how do I chase that paper. It's going to be how do I understand myself and my stories, and then how do I heal them.
Catfish.
Yeah. But
Oh, the look of the one person who wanted to make 6 figures fast. You should have clicked on one of those many abundant click funnels on Facebook.
yeah, actually, and I think that I lost. So I think that one of the students stopped attending because after the first one, where I took them on a meditation journey to understand their own paradigm, like they disappeared. And I'm like, yeah, this wasn't going to be a get rich quick scheme. This is the work 24/7. This is your life, honey. Like, you don't chase the paper, you live your life, and you live your life with the most integrity, and the money is the reward because the energy starts to flow.
Yes. And yeah, like we're not going to dismiss, especially with like the whole law of attraction thing, that's usually people's first foot into understanding attracting and manifesting money. But we're not going to dismiss all of these layers that can help us or create blockages for us, right? So it's beautiful that you actually move through people through that like awareness and the meditation, because that's needed. I think we seldom pause to even reflect where we're operating from. And the next thing you know, you're just burnt out, you know?
And you're like, how did I get here? You did it, honey.
Sorry. Oops.
Yeah.
Still cute though. Oops.
Yeah. Until it's like the third time and you're like, girl, get it together.
I know.
Pull up your panties. Like, come on.
Pull up those bloomers. Actually, or just
Yeah.
ditch them altogether because we don't need one more thing suffocating us. Oh, yeah. I'm so glad that you're teaching that course.
It's been really fun and it's been really fulfilling. And it's funny because I held on to it for a while before actually launching it, because I had come across a lot of mindset practitioners and belief system practitioners. And I saw how they were working, and I'm like, damn, we work the same way. Like, do we really need another person pushing this shit? Like, and then I had to just come to terms with my imposter syndrome and be like, that person is going to do them, and I'm just going to do me. And that's what I'm calling in, because I don't necessarily want their clients, because if their clients are like them, I don't necessarily, you know, we
Yeah.
can have purple in 20 different shades and it's not exactly the same, right? And that's what I mean. Like, I just need to go out there and I'm calling in the people that are going to dive with me, and that's all I can hope for. But
I'm going to second that purple comment, because isn't that true? Because I love purple, but there are some shades of purple I just can't. And that's true with practitioners, and that's true with courses, and that's true with everything. Like a quick little story about money, magic and money manifesting is actually in 2020, I took my whole practice online, like most people, right? Because of the pandemic. And I actually got, okay, so there's this one client, and it was during like a slower period, and I was kind of feeling a little concerned because, you know, I usually don't worry about bookings, but I was feeling concerned because I'm like, ooh, do I have to reevaluate something? Is this a sign from spirit that I have to, you know, just take a moment to pause and like be mindful about how we're operating in this digital world? And so I got this random client who had just found me online. Not a referral at all, just random. And this is why understanding what you say yes to energetically is so important, because that person actually was not the ideal client for me. 10 minutes into the reading, I just got this really strong message and like also this somatic feeling in my body of a no. And I couldn't even shuffle the cards. And this was already 10 minutes in. And so basically me and the client had discussed, and I said, I'm really sorry, but I can't go on with this reading. And, we signed off respectfully and everything. But they had even offered, I can still pay you for the session. And I said no, because even though that is really nice,
Yeah.
what actually ended up happening the very next day is I got 3 bookings with people.
It was a test.
It was a test. honey, they are testing you every corner, every minute. Just
yes, absolutely.
Not to intimidate anyone, but the things that you say yes to are going to amplify what you're going to continue to receive. And so had I said yes to that, I would also be confirming within myself that I don't have boundaries as to who I serve and who I work with. But in saying no, and even also rejecting the offer of money and compensation, I would also be, if I had said yes to the money, I'd also be feeding into that narrative of like, yes, I have to say yes every time something's offered to me because there's not enough opportunity, when it wasn't true. It
Totally.
just straight up wasn't true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how that ended, because I know early on in my practice, I was always afraid of that happening. Like, how will I confront a situation where I come across a client that doesn't feel right? Will I have the balls to be like, no, this isn't working out? And back then, I probably wouldn't have. And I think I already knew that back then, which is why I didn't book as many. And so now, like, if that were to happen today, hell yeah, I'd just be like, this doesn't feel right, just like you said, and you just have to cut it, and you have to really like cut and release it. Like, you don't need to bring that bad juju money into your field. But I want to ask a quick question, and then we're out of time. But how? Because I like I came across someone's account on Instagram, and they teach alternative forms of divination. And I feel like you could read anything. I feel like you could literally read anything. And this came to mind because they were pushing, like, oh, yeah, I read Taco Bell packets. And I'm like, I could see that. I feel like there's a message in everything. It's just like, how willing are you to see it for what it is,
Oh, yeah.
So not necessarily that you're doing any form of alternative divination, but how do you teach people to use tarot to really like amplify how they're living?
Oof, juicy question. I will try to be as succinct and quick with this as possible. But if we look at the history of tarot has evolved so much throughout its migration story. And especially as a person of color, who my DNA and my story has migrated so much, and there's many layers within who I am as a multidimensional person. That's how it's reflected within the practices that we take up. And so the reason why I teach tarot is out of respect and solidarity for that migration story and that really interesting evolution of a tool, but also the respect for our intuitive selves and creating a container within tarot. There's clear differences between tarot and other different forms of divination, and other forms of divination are really valid. But really, tarot, and the way that I work with it, the way that I promote it to people, is to use it as a tool of communication. It's not about empowering only the tool and only surrendering all power and control to the tool, but it's also a reminder that the power that we seek the intuition that we speak, the knowledge that we seek is within us. And so how do we create a container for that magic? How do we contain that and create boundaries and focus for this power? We choose a tool that can help guide us on this path and help us inform how we're going to focus this intention. Just like mediumship, right? You don't just like go into a session, you're like, okay, spirit, I'm here, right?
Unless you're the Hollywood medium, maybe.
Maybe. But I would be surprised if they don't have some kind of grounding exercise, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what tarot is, and the way that I teach tarot is to be used as a tool of communication with your spirit, your relationship with spirit, your ancestors, those who've passed on. Does it kind of cross over into the mediumship world? Yes. But isn't that what intuition is? Isn't that what spirituality is? And it's a really beautiful opportunity to also dive deep into this ancient and understand how we connect to this as multidimensional people, as people who have our own history and our own migration stories and our own complexities. So it's all juicy, it's all fun. We eat intensity for breakfast, but then we also have fun while doing it.
I love that. Eat intensity for breakfast. I could use that in the morning. It would help me get up.
Isn't that why we drink coffee?
Yeah, basically. Well, TJ, thank you so much for joining me. Why don't you share with the watchers and the replay watchers how they can find you? And I would love if you could join me again sometime.
That would be so fun. This was so much fun. And thank you for inviting me. It's always such a time connecting. So folks can find me on Instagram at Daily Magic Shop. That is my shop business Instagram. Or you can search me up at dailymagic.ca is pretty much where you find me lurking on the internet. Pretty straightforward, and that's where you can find me. But I don't bite, so if anyone has any questions or curiosities, I'm always more than happy to have a conversation. And if you heard that in the background, that's my dog snoring. I don't know if you heard that.
I didn't, but that's cute.
Oh, okay. It was really loud, so woo. COVID times.
You're good. Real quick, funny story. I used to have a French bulldog when I was single, and I lived by myself. And one night, he was being a creep, and I think he was just awake watching me sleep. But I shot up out of bed because I didn't hear him snoring. And I was like, where's my dog? I had such a heart attack. But he was just laying on the floor staring at me like a creep.
I'm quickly learning, which you can probably second with your Frenchie experience, that they're barely dogs.
They're more of a pig.
Yeah, this is not a dog. He's like part gremlin, part pig. I don't really know, but I love him nonetheless.
Well, thank you again for joining, and I will include your links in the show notes. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Join me here next week. I'm going to be doing live emoji readings. So see you guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye.